He doesn't even know her.
I know, but it's all right.
Prince George had never been in a fight before, that at least not publicly. Inside Windsor Hall, he was known for being controlled, careful, quiet. The kind of royal child constantly reminded that every expression, every sentence, every mistake could become tomorrow's headline. Which was why nobody inside the palace believed the first report that came from his boarding school that afternoon, especially Prince William. I was inside the palace security office when the call arrived. At first, the headmaster sounded nervous. Then came the sentence that made the entire room fall silent. Your Highness, Prince George struck another student. Even William looked stunned. Because George never lost control. Not like that. The school immediately requested privacy, while staff separated both students involved. But within 2 hours, rumors had already started spreading among aristocratic families connected to the school. By evening, Windsor Hall quietly shifted into damage control mode. Official statements were prepared. Media teams contacted. Lawyers alerted. Not because George had seriously injured someone, because the boy he hit came from one of Britain's oldest aristocratic families, and according to witnesses, George hit him hard enough to knock him onto the dining hall floor in front of dozens of students. That night, Prince William personally traveled to the school. I accompanied the security team assigned to the visit. Honestly, I expected George to apologize immediately. Instead, the moment William entered the private office where George sat waiting alone, I realized something was wrong. George didn't look angry. He looked devastated. His knuckles were bruised, part of his school uniform. Sleeve had torn slightly near the cuff, but his eyes looked worse than the injuries. William quietly closed the office door behind him, then finally asked, "What happened?" George stayed silent for several seconds, then answered quietly, "He talked about Charlotte." William's expression changed immediately. What exactly did he say? At first, George refused to answer, but eventually, he did. Earlier that evening during dinner, several older boys had started discussing the royal family. After seeing recent photographs of Charlotte online, most of it was harmless gossip, until one student made a cruel comment about Charlotte's recent emotional struggles appearing in tabloids. George tried ignoring it twice, but then the boy laughed and said something worse. According to George, the student claimed Charlotte was becoming unstable like Diana. The room inside the headmaster's office went completely silent. Even Prince William stopped moving. George stared down at his bruised hands before continuing quietly. He said, "People only pretend to care about her because she's royal." William slowly looked away. And honestly, that reaction said more than words ever could. Because suddenly this wasn't about a school fight anymore. That it was about George sitting there, listening while strangers mocked his little sister like she was entertainment. George finally looked up. He doesn't even know her. That was the first moment all night he sounded less like a future king, and more like an older brother trying to protect someone he loved. The headmaster later explained that George initially stayed calm through most of the conversation, but when the students started joking about Charlotte's panic attacks and emotional withdrawal, George snapped. Several witnesses later admitted the dining hall became silent before George even stood up, because everyone there knew royal children were trained never to lose control publicly, especially George. But that night, he did. The aristocratic family immediately demanded disciplinary action. Quiet pressure began building behind the scenes almost instantly. Some people wanted suspension. Others feared media exposure. But then something unexpected happened. Princess Charlotte found out. Later that evening, after George returned to Windsor Hall, Charlotte quietly asked to speak with him alone. Nobody knows everything they discussed inside her bedroom, but according to one staff member standing nearby, Charlotte cried almost the entire conversation. Not because George fought for her, because she blamed herself for it happening at all. The next morning, I passed George sitting silently outside Charlotte's bedroom holding an ice pack against his bruised hand. He looked exhausted, like he regretted losing control, but not the reason why. Then Charlotte slowly opened the door. At first, neither of them spoke. Her eyes dropped toward his injured knuckles, and honestly, that seemed to hurt her more than the fight itself. Did they really say those things? About me, she asked softly. George immediately looked away. That silence was enough of an answer. Charlotte's expression changed. Instantly, not anger, not shock. Something worse, embarrassment. Like part of her already believed those things herself. George noticed immediately. Charlotte, but she interrupted him quietly. You shouldn't have gotten in trouble because of me. That was the moment George finally lost the calm expression he had been forcing all day. No, he said firmly, you don't get to say that. Charlotte looked startled. George stepped closer. They don't know you. They don't know how hard you try. And I don't get to make you feel small just because people watch our family all the time. Charlotte's eyes immediately filled with tears. Then she quietly asked, do you ever get tired of protecting me? George stared at her for several seconds, then finally answered, only when you think you have to handle everything alone, honestly. That was the first moment either of them looked like children again. Instead of members of the royal family, Charlotte suddenly hugged him without warning, and George hugged her back immediately despite the pain in his hand. No cameras. No royal staff. No palace protocol. Just a brother trying to stop his little sister from feeling ashamed of herself. Later that night, I passed Prince William standing silently outside Charlotte's room, watching both of them laugh quietly inside. And for the first time since the school called, he finally looked relieved. Because behind all the royal expectations, cameras, and impossible pressure, George had reminded Charlotte of something incredibly important. Inside Windsor Hall, she was still family before anything else. If you enjoyed this emotional royal drama, let us know your thoughts below. Do you think Prince George was right to defend Charlotte, even if it meant breaking royal protocol? And if you were Charlotte, would you have forgiven him for the fight? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional royal stories, hidden palace drama, and untold moments from inside Windsor Hall.